I have so many pictures of it, but like, you just have to like take another one.
So much about making a good photo relies on getting right the things that have nothing to do with what makes photography popular online. I'm talking about megapixels, ISO performance, the size of the sensor, all that kind of stuff. For the kinds of photos that I like to take, for example, they're like landscapes, time lapses, and environmental portraits, there are a lot more parameters around making a successful image than just my knowledge of photography. About 2 years ago, I started on a project where I wanted to take advantage of the varied topography of California. This is a crazy state where you can be surfing in the morning, skiing at noon, and sitting on a desert by the evening. And me being kind of impulsive, I would sort of just grab whatever camera equipment I had, throw it in whatever bag I had, jump in the car, and hit the road, ready to take my photo. But in doing this, I got kind of distracted by the photos that I was envisioning myself making, and sort of didn't really fully think out the process that it would take to actually make those photos good. I sort of just thought to myself I would rely on my skill with the camera and my framing, and that was about all I would have to think about. There are several examples where this simply didn't work, and what happened is I got either mediocre images or just really not what I thought I was going to get. Sometimes it was just an abject failure. In this recurring segment of Shoot to Keep, we're going to take a look at situations where I made some serious errors in judgment that led to me not getting the images that I wanted to get, and going back, fixing those mistakes, and trying again. In this video, let's talk about one particular place called Allomere Falls. Allomere Falls is an extremely rare type of waterfall known as a coastal waterfall or a tide fall. Now, tide falls are where you have a freshwater river source pouring out over a waterfall directly into the ocean. There are only 4 notable tide falls in the world. 2 of them are in California, 1 is in New Zealand, and 1 of them is in Hong Kong. The other one in California is called Macquarie Falls, and it's in Big Sur, and it is extremely beautiful. A lot of photographers go and see it. It's pretty easy to access, and it's a big cascading tube of water coming out of a cliff and into the ocean. Macquarie Falls is photographed a lot because it's very easy to get to and it's a very picturesque place. Allomere Falls, on the other hand, is extremely hard to get to, I would say a little less picturesque, but is a more typical waterfall, as this one is more of a river that goes over a cascading shale cliff directly into the ocean. When I first did this trip 2 years ago, I chose Allomere Falls because it was more challenging to get to, which to me meant like the photos that I was going to get are going to be more, they're going to stand out more, they're going to be unique, as opposed to Macquarie where you could get basically any photo you want at any time you want. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the very nitty-gritty details of all the mistakes that I made. I actually originally made a list, and there were over 16 things that I did wrong on the first time I attempted this photo trip. So I'm going to try and condense the mistakes I made down to 2 major things. I wasn't prepared with my equipment, and I tried to do too much. In this second attempt, I'm trying to make better what I did everything wrong the first time, and that goes from everything from the backpack I was using to the equipment that I was bringing to the plan of attack that I had for the types of photos that I was going to take. I want to first talk about doing too much. In my mind, when I set out to do this the first time, I thought I was going to do a time lapse, I was going to do some long exposure photography because I love long exposures of waterfalls, and I wanted to do some portraits of my friend Caitlin, who was accompanying me on the trip. When you have this many disciplines all competing for your time and effort, odds are pretty high you're not going to be able to devote the amount of time and energy to each one in order to create a perfect image. And that's what happened to me here. But additionally, it requires a lot of different equipment to do each of those 3 things, which meant I was carrying equipment for all 3 of those things on a trip that I didn't really research that well. I want to go over the equipment that I brought the first time so you can see kind of how absurd it was. I had a 1DX Mark II, a Canon 5D Mark IV, a Nikon D750, and a Panasonic GH4, all of those using different lenses. All of these things had to fit into one bag. In addition to that, I also had my linear slider, which is a Cinetics rail, which I love, but by itself weighs 25 pounds in its bag. Instead of trying to do so much on the second trip, I really condensed my vision down to making sure I wanted to get one thing. If I could leave there with just one thing, I would be happy, and that would be one image of my friend Caitlin. I wanted to take a really good photo of her because I wanted to thank her for what she did for me the first time we did this trip, where she actually was responsible for carrying the giant 25-pound slider bag because I physically was unable to put it on myself. I couldn't take any more weight. Caitlin, as a trooper, carried that thing for the whole hike, and man, I'm so sorry that I did that to her, that I wanted to make it up to her. So it was about this point in the hike, 1.38 miles in, that last time I realized I had made a grave error in in judgment with that backpack I was wearing.
Yeah, it was pretty,
And you had...
I had some awkward,
It is a bad bag. Yeah, so it's my Cinetics rail.
Yeah.
And yeah, we brought a rail.
Over this backpack. I couldn't get through any of these small little like walkways.
You were a trooper though. I don't remember you complaining that much about it.
At all because...
Yeah, that's why I keep taking you on these trips.
Yep.
After the last experience, I really wanted to revisit Allomere Falls, but this time with a different focus and different gear. The gear was a big deal. I wanted to be able to bring a good range of focal lengths in both a video and a still camera, but didn't want to be groaning under a 50-pound pack like last time. This was a situation that begged for something more compact and lightweight, but I didn't want to sacrifice quality. In other words, it was a situation tailor-made for a crop frame camera. Fujifilm gear has always tested well in the lab, and the other imaging resource guys who have shot with it have had good things to say. So we reached out to Fujifilm to see if they'd like to sponsor this shoot. They were up for it, so I got a nice set of Fujifilm lenses and a couple of bodies to use that were just what were called for in this situation. The plan was to bring two cameras this time, one because I wanted to shoot video of what I was doing and one to shoot stills on. The camera that I'm shooting video on is the camera I'm shooting now, which is the Fujifilm X-T3. The camera that I shot stills on was the Fujifilm X-T30, a really small compact camera that's basically the X-T3 in a smaller package and was great for stills. Along with those two cameras, I chose the 14mm f1.8, the 16mm f1.4, the 80mm f2.8, and the 50 to 140mm f2.8. I chose Fujifilm for a few reasons. I was going to get stellar image quality, the cameras themselves are very small and light, and the lenses themselves are also small and light. I wanted to, as mentioned, focus on getting at least one solid portrait and record video of the process, of course. The reason I chose Fujifilm was because, one, I wasn't afraid of not getting great image quality. Fujifilm cameras make really nice photos. Anyone who's shot with Fuji knows this. But the other reason I chose Fujifilm was because I could get that great image quality without adding too much weight to my bag. Now, it's highly likely that some of you are ready to argue with me on this, like why didn't I choose Sony or another full-frame mirrorless camera brand, like there's some from Canon, Nikon, and Sony, of course. Well, the reason behind this is that full-frame isn't necessary for everything, and honestly, in this case, I think full-frame would actually have hurt me more than it would have helped. You see, even though the camera bodies are generally smaller, when you go full frame, the optics themselves have to be larger in order to accommodate the larger sensor. So shooting full frame means I'm not actually losing any weight with my lenses, which are some of the more heavy things in my backpack. When you're using a sensor like an APS-C sensor that you find inside of Fujifilm, you're using something that's still large enough to have the qualities of larger sensors, like better ISO performance and great image quality, but you also don't have to deal with the much larger optics, and you could either bring more lenses for more options or cut down your load entirely. In this case, I chose to bring 4 lenses for 2 cameras, which was fewer lenses overall than I brought last time, and more options in terms of focal lengths than I had last time. It was, to me, a win-win situation. At one point, I held both the X-T3 and X-T30 in my hands, and together they weighed less than the 1DX Mark II. So I was elated with how much I was going to save on weight between the 2 trips. Essentially, my goal was to compact all of the capabilities of the cameras that I brought last time, which were 4 different cameras, into 2 smaller cameras and associated optics. And I think using the Fujifilm X-T3 and X-T30 accomplishes that. Worth mentioning, as part of the not doing very good research on the first part of the hike, I didn't really think about this other decision that I made, which was I was insisting on being at the waterfall around golden hour, which, if you think about it, if it's 5 miles in, 5 miles back, and it takes maybe an hour and a half if you're going really fast each way, I wasn't really taking in consideration having to hike back where it might be dark. And that was really foolish. We could have gotten hurt out there. So on the second hike, I didn't give myself any constraints on time and was going to make do with the type of light that was out there. All right, as we mentioned, I decided on the last time that we did this trip that I needed it to be golden hour in order to get good photos. And as such, we didn't start this hike until much later. And it was also later in the year, so the sun set sooner. Like right now, the sun's not gonna set until 8:45. But then I think it was setting, what, like 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was much, much less time. So Caitlin here, right about where we just were, started to get worried that we weren't gonna make it.
I was like, we're gonna be hiking out in the dark. I didn't bring a flashlight. We weren't prepared for this. All of my like panicky survivor things that I remember from like middle school, like Girl Scouts started kicking in.
Okay, so we are now at the spot where I spent way too long last time. Like, I think I was here for 30 minutes doing something stupid. I stood right by this tree. I sat right there. I set up my tripod and my rail. Hi, mosquito. Get out of here. Tripod and rail right there. And I aimed at these branches. And I time-lapsed. And the thing is, I didn't just time-lapse. I full-on rail time-lapsed. I got everything out and I did it. I'm going to show you the time-lapse now. You can see how crappy it came out, because there was no reason for me to do it. I was tired. I think I was just looking for a reason to stop moving.
Yeah, I wanted to like say something, and then I was like, I'm just not gonna say anything.
You should have said something.
Because I'm not a professional.
Because that was stupid. Don't do that. Next step is we gotta go down there. But like, what makes this special is that it's exceedingly rare to have a waterfall like this go directly into the ocean. It's one of the few spots you can find one, and it is very pretty. So last time, I didn't even get all the way down to the beach. For some reason I didn't process that was the entire reason to come. So this time, Caitlin has been here since, and she actually made it down last time, so I'm just following her. And
a little scary.
More scrambling is to happen here. When we actually got to the waterfall, I felt really good. I had a lot of energy left and I was really excited to take pictures, and that's in stark contrast to what was the case the last time, where I was pretty exhausted and kind of helter-skelter in my mind as I was rushing to get something done before the sunset. As I mentioned earlier, the first time that I got out to the waterfall, I was trying to go for golden hour light, and that meant I was rushing to get some type of photo taken, and I was just trying to put up all my gear as fast as possible and shoot as much as I could, and I ended up just like not getting very much. I didn't even get a photo of the actual Allomere waterfall because of it. I just got the two top, like smaller falls, the rapids that are right before the main waterfall. On the second trip, my main focus was entirely the actual Allomere Falls. I was going to actually shoot Allomere Falls, and I was going to put my friend Caitlin in front of it, and we were going to do some portraits. And when we did finally get there, we weren't really pressed by time. We had energy because we didn't waste it all trying to hike there, and it just felt much more smooth than it did the first time. All right, I've switched to my nice camera now that we're at our location, and while Caitlin's getting ready, I'm going to explain to you basically my idea this time. So, and the last time we were here, I didn't even make it down here. We were up above and just at the top two waterfalls, and Caitlin was just walking along doing yoga as well along the side, and I was just so tired after missing this hike by 2 miles from not being prepared to having a bag too full of stuff that I wasn't really processing making a great image. So hopefully we'll be able to make a photo that is more meaningful for Caitlin going forward and makes me more satisfied as a photographer as well. So I'm going to do a couple different sets. One of them I'm going to do with a wide angle. This is the Fujifilm 16mm f1.4 on a Fujifilm X-T30, and this is small, compact, and nice and wide. And I'm going to do a nice big portrait of her with the waterfall in it, and then I'll switch to a longer lens to do some closer-up portrait-like stuff, do some nice bokeh and that sort of thing. So we'll see how that works. So when we got to the waterfall, I decided that I was going to shoot with my wide lenses first and then come in afterwards to do some tighter regular portrait shots. And the reason I wanted to shoot wide angles first is this is really the photo that in my mind I had seen that I wanted to get. I was thinking of this high-key, high-contrast, kind of athletic commercial looking photo where she would be in front of the waterfall in athletic wear, and I would capture her in some advertising-y commercial looking way. I am by no means an advertising or commercial photographer. It's just a style of photo that I wanted to try, and I thought it would be conducive to the environment. I was pretty happy with the images we got pretty close to right off the bat. Like, I kind of got the photo that I wanted relatively quickly and it looked really good. But I wasn't satisfied with that. Because we were able to kind of take our time with this, it occurred to me that I should ask Caitlin what kind of photo she wanted. And she mentioned to me that she's, as a fan of yoga, really likes the way that mermaid pose looks and thought that it would look really cool up against the waterfall. This is not something that I thought of at all, and if I hadn't asked Caitlin what she wanted to do, I wouldn't have taken this picture. And what's funny about that is this is actually probably my favorite picture from the set, and it wouldn't have happened had I not taken my time and asked her what she wanted. I'm going to take this time to note that in addition to the camera equipment, there is one other thing that I brought that I didn't bring last time, and that's the LaCie Copilot. The reason I brought this is a portable hard drive, is because on the last trip I actually had a memory card fail on me and I lost several images, and I just didn't want to have to go through that again. Basically, something went wrong in between the capture the images on site and getting them back to the lab here and editing them. And if I had backed them up on site, I probably would have been able to avoid that heartache. The reason I like the LaCie Copilot is it is small, it's relatively lightweight, and it plugs directly into your phone, and that's how you access and control what the files are doing on the device itself. I don't like trusting wireless hard drive things. They just tend to not be very reliable, they're slower, and they just don't work as well. I really like the Copilot because of the direct plug into the phone for access and file management. All right, so in addition to this 16mm 1.4, I also have an 80mm 2.8, and this is what I'm going to use to get some separation and shoot her. In this particular image, I got help from my friend Pratik Nayak. He's an outstanding retoucher at Solstice Retouch, and he does some of the best skin work in the industry, and he's a really good friend of mine, and I asked him if he would be willing to help me out on this image, and he was. So I'm gonna put a link to his Instagram in the description. Please give him some support because I think this photo looks fantastic, and I wouldn't have been able to make it look as good as it does without him. All right, we're gonna try something different. She wants to get in the water over there, but not fully because it's very, very cold. So we're gonna use a zoom and try something different. All right, I think that's gonna wrap up what we're gonna do right here. We'll talk some more about this when we get back. Gonna knock me over, get me all wet. I don't wanna be wet. But all right, we got 5 miles back now. Lucky us.
Wait, we have 2 beers before we hike back first.
You'll notice that my notes on how I actually took these photos are relatively short in comparison to the amount of time I've talked about the preparation for getting to that point. And that's the entire point of this video. This is all about that preparation and the stuff that matters besides my photographic knowledge. The photos that I took look good only because of the steps I took to make sure that I was prepared to take them beforehand. If I didn't do that, I would have ended up with the same problem I had the first time, where I went out there with these grand ideas of these photos I was going to take, but could not execute because I was so ill-prepared for the situation. When I compressed the amount of things I wanted to do from 3 down to 1, changed my equipment and my backpack so my weight was less, and actually took my time and got there at a time that was reasonable rather than rushing to fight the light, well, then I was able to focus my mental energy on making a good photo, capturing an image that I wanted to capture. And I did that here because of all that planning. I want to thank our sponsor Fujifilm here, who we reached out to specifically for this task because we wanted to use their cameras. Fujifilm made sense for this project, and that's why they were an excellent sponsor for us. Additionally, I want to say thank you to LaCie for being our official storage sponsor on this video. They help keep my photos safe, and I felt very secure in putting them on the Copilot while I was out on location, and obviously all the images made it back just fine. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next time on Shoot to Keep. Cool. Ah, there it is. I got it. Cheers.
Cheers! My favorite reward after anything strenuous. Even mildly strenuous, like getting out of bed for work.
A beer?
A beer.